Hi there. Most likely this year, you'll have spoken to family, friends, and colleagues remotely via the internet. That is how we've been able to make this podcast. Therefore, it's very likely that you've experienced those amazing audio special effects like compression, lag, and my personal favourite, sounding like a robot. So don't you worry, we've worked very hard and managed to achieve those exact same special effects on this podcast at times, so that we remain on brand with most people's 2020. I hope you enjoy the show.
This is the Lockdown Hotline Sessions with your host, Danielle Lonnon.
Sorry, please answer that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lockdown Hotline Sessions with me, your host, Danielle Lonnon. This is the podcast where we put identical questions to all of our guests, but they mix it up, spice it up, and entertain us with their unique take on COVID and lockdown in 2020. Today's guest is Mark Shenton. Mark has been a full-time freelance London-based theatre critic and journalist since 2002. He has variously, and sometimes simultaneously, been chief theatre critic for the Sunday Express, The Stage, What's on Stage, What's On in London magazine, and londontheatre.co.uk, and also written for The Guardian, The Observer, Time Out, and The Independent on Sunday during his time. He has taught at Arts Ed London in Chiswick on musical theatre history since 2012, as well as on the BA acting course. He read law at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge. He was, until recently, president of the Critics Circle and is also on the board of Mercury Musical Developments and the National Student Drama Festival, NSDF. Mark Shenton, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Very good, Dan. I'm actually up in the Lake District. London is in lockdown again, Tier 3 restrictions, so we've escaped. We come up to a really beautiful, tranquil part of the world.
Oh, wow, that sounds so exciting. Okay, well, as you know, we ask identical questions to all of our guests. This is your beginner's call. Are you ready to start?
I am.
Excellent. Okay, cue number 1. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself that perhaps wasn't covered in the introduction?
Right. Well, the introduction, of course, is my official bio. My unofficial bio, thing that I'm very open about, and I've spoken about a lot in online and in previous podcasts, but I'm very much a mental health advocate. So one of the things I've been very open about is the fact that I have suffered all my life from depressions where periods of depression, which I always emerge from, but when they've increased in intensity and duration over the last 10 years or so. So the two depressions ago, I went on for 21 months, and the last depression I had went on for 16 months. But I'm now out of it, and all is well. And I guess the important message I want to convey about this is that it's necessary, because a lot of your listeners, a lot of people listening may themselves suffer from depression. One of the things I'm here to tell you is, of course, it's not fun to be depressed, but there is an end.
Right. Well, that is some excellent advice. And what I'll do is I will put some links in the description below. So should you need to speak to anyone, you can have a click on them and find someone in your relevant country.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though you've mentioned that you've just popped up on holidays, what is your current location and what is the state of lockdown there?
Well, my current location is Cumbria, which is a county of Britain, England, in the northwest. So it's somewhere between Manchester and Blackpool, and it's very hilly, very lakey. So it's actually known colloquially as the Lake District. And we are right overlooking a beautiful lake called the Lake Windermere. And when I finish this call, we're going to take a little boat trip across the lake down to another town called Bowness. And the state of lockdown here is that in Britain, we've been divided into tiers. So there's tier 1, which is where you can basically, the COVID risk is low. There's tier 2, which used to affect a lot of the country. And now there's tier 3, which is the most severe risk, and that affects the apparently something like 70% of the population now is in Tier 3. We are in the Lake District, we're in Tier 2, so the risk isn't quite as high.
Right. Okay. And my follow-up question to the state of lockdown is it mandatory for you to wear a mask?
It absolutely is, yes. Unless you have a clear medical reason for not wearing one, it is mandatory.
Okay. All right. Wow. I love the Lake District in the UK. I think it's a very, very beautiful part, and I'm actually quite jealous that you're there and I'm not.
Indeed.
So please enjoy your holiday for me.
I am.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to question number 3. Are you still in the same location as pre-COVID? And that's in early March this year. And are you still doing the same thing? And when I mean, are you still doing the same thing? If you worked in a pub in early March, are you still working in a pub now?
My career has, for the last 18 years, been a full-time theatre critic. When COVID kicked in March, all the theatres, of course, shut down in London and New York. Those are the two main territories I cover. I'm London-based, but I actually have an apartment in New York, and I between both cities a lot across the year. I probably make 5 or 6 transatlantic journeys to New York to see theatre there and to write about it. And actually, just before, New York theatres, Broadway theatres shut down before London theatres did. They shut down on a Thursday night. And the following Tuesday, we were due to fly to New York, my husband and I, in order to cover the new season. They initially, as you probably know, they announced that Broadway theatres would be shut until April the 15th. That was the initial shutdown. So I thought, well, guess what? We won't go next Tuesday, but we'll go back on April the 15th. I had no idea that we'd be here 9 months later and still in lockdown. In fact, Broadway is not going to return now, probably until next September, October at the earliest.
Wow.
So actually, it would have been a shutdown of more than a year. So basically, London then went into shutdown on March the 15th, so about a week later after Broadway shut down. And we didn't have any theatre for months and months. But in September, theatre did come back in London temporarily. There was a few trial runs. There was a show up in Wembley Park in a big hangar-like space where they were able to socially distance and brought back a show. Since then, there have been various shows happening that were open to review. And then culminating in, we had a lockdown a few weeks ago in across the nation again, a second lockdown, in which all the theatres were shut down with the idea that it can reopen again from December the 3rd, which is only a couple of weeks ago. And December 3, theatres all joyfully reopened. And then this week, on Tuesday, which is Tuesday the 15th of December, then London was placed into Tier 3 restrictions, which is basically a lockdown again. So actually all the shows that have opened in those 2 weeks have now been shut down again. And in fact, the London Palladium has rehearsed at Pantomime, which is only going to be a limited season anyway. They began performances last Friday with an invited royal performance with Prince William, and he took his family to see Pantomime at the dress rehearsal on Friday afternoon. They gave 2 public performances Saturday, 2 public performances Sunday, 2 on Tuesday, and then shut down. They have lost tons and tons of money because putting up a show to run for, obviously it was going to be a hard sell anyway. The seating capacity was reduced from 2,400 to 1,000, so they socially distanced seating. It was a tall order anyway to recoup, but they basically opened and have now shut after 6 performances, thereby losing pretty much their entire capitalization. And as you know, probably would guess, there's been no insurance available to buy in the eventual closure for this season.
Wow, the poor producers. That's a really hard slog.
So how's the impact on me and whether I'm doing the same job that I was doing? Well, 2 things have happened. One is that obviously there's been a lot less to write about. Some critics have continued writing about online theatre, because there's quite a lot of online theatre available. But also, independent of the changes that have happened with COVID, is that the main outlet I had, which is a website called londontheatre.co.uk, the longest established website on UK theatre in the UK, founded in 1995, when most people didn't really know about the internet. It changed ownership just before the pandemic. Last February, March, it was acquired by an American company called TodayTix, who are now very aggressively one of the leading suppliers of tickets in the world. They basically are venture capitalist owned, and their mission in life is to go around acquiring as much property as they can, whether it's websites of any description or entire companies. So they're swallowing up these companies, and what happened was that londontheatre.co.uk was swallowed up by them. Their editorial team has been entirely replaced, and they are now running the site from New York. When I contacted the New York editor, she said that obviously with the pandemic, there was nothing to write about. She'll be in touch when the pandemic was over. September came, shows started reopening. I contacted her And she wrote back saying she wanted to use new and diverse voices. So basically, she didn't give me the fact, but she basically told me she was going to change the direction of the site. Well, I accepted that and thought, well, life changes, and it does. And then I didn't hear from her for 3 months. So I'd assumed that my relationship with them was dead. She then sent me quite a cross email a week ago saying, actually, I never told you that our relationship was severed. Well, she's frankly being a bit disingenuous, because when you don't hear from somebody for 3 months, it's over. Anyway,
Exactly.
the relationship is now over. And so effectively, I've lost my job, not necessarily because of the pandemic, but inspired by it. Having said all the above, the pandemic has changed all of our lives, and mine in particular, in the sense that, pure and simple, I go to the theatre between 7 and 12 times a week in normal times. I kid you not. I'm at the theatre every single night. For 6 months, the theatre, that's all.
Right.
And during this time, I started to discover new pleasures. For example, I watched the entirety of Homeland, which I had never seen at all. I'm never at home to watch TV. So actually being able to watch great TV, and I was watching Homeland thinking, and of course it's got lots of great theatre actors from Broadway and the West End in it, and I kept thinking, God, I missed this whole world. So now I'm watching a ton more TV. I'm watching good TV. I'm also watching crap TV. Crap TV is also fun.
I'm going to move on to question number 4. Since COVID-19 and its restriction started, what do you miss doing that you can't do right now?
The thing that I've missed most since COVID started, of course, is the theatre. Because theatre is my life. I'm a thorough-born theatre addict who goes to the theatre between 7 and 12 times a week during normal times. And I go to the theatre all around the world. I mean, you and I met because I came to Australia to see theatre. That's the reason why I travel anywhere. I don't think I ever go, apart from right now in the Lake District, I don't ever go to a place unless there's theatre there. And in fact, coming to the Lake District right now, which is where I'm sitting in a gorgeous environment, is only because a few years ago I came to see a show at a theatre in the Lake District, and I thought to myself, one day I'm going to have to go back and return and see it, not just to see a show here. So I came up for one night before to see a show and decided that I must come back here and see it because there are beautiful lakes up here. So that's why I'm back here now. So missing theatre has been the main thing I've missed. And also really missing travelling to New York. Because New York is my other home from home. My husband and I have an apartment there because I love going there so often. We've not been there all year, which has been really, really difficult. In fact, so much so that we had a friend staying at our apartment when the theatre shut down. He was representing Six on Broadway. He was the press agent for Six on Broadway. It was due to open on the Thursday night. It's the night that they closed down the theatres. So they never got to their opening night. So he was the last person to stay there. So 9 months later, no one's been in the flat. We actually had to send a friend round to check that the flat was still okay.
Yes. And so the flat is actually okay now. It's fine. Your friend went in, checked it out, and that's all hunky-dory.
Absolutely. And hopefully one day soon we'll be able to get on a plane and get there ourselves. Now, a really interesting thing, I just wanted to mention this, is that an awful lot of people in the UK are, flights have resumed, as you know, during COVID. People are saying, how can you sit on a plane for 3 or 4 hours, but not in a theatre for 3 hours? And there's a very good reason where there's a big difference. And this is something I have researched, is that on aeroplanes, the air is recycled in an airplane cabin every 3 minutes. Same protocol that you have in an operating theatre. But in a physical theatre, as you probably know from London theatres, many of them have very poor circulation. So they probably are a COVID hotspot. They could well be a place where COVID could spread really easily.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's a really fascinating scientific tidbit. Excellent research. What skill do you feel that you have improved at during this time?
The easiest answer is I know how to use Zoom. Zoom has become a major part of my life. And actually, I'm really, really pleased about it because one of the things I guess this period is teaching us is new ways to do old things. So, they always say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, this old dog is learning many new tricks. So, for example, all those efforts we used to do to set up an interview with an actor or something, a big part of my career is writing up interviews. You don't actually have to be in the same room with them anymore. You just have a Zoom call. None of that nonsense is necessary anymore. And the other thing that I've spent a lot of time doing this during the short lockdown is I've attended to my emotional health because I mentioned already I'm suffering from depression. One of the things I've been doing is I belong to not one but two 12-step programs. One deals with addiction and the other one deals with family of origin trauma. The family of origin trauma fellowship, which is actually a very, very intense and deep amount of work required, I've been hosting and attending meetings virtually on a daily basis via Zoom, thanks to that. And during this period, I mentioned depression earlier. I had been in a 16-month depression. Doing this work has freed me from the depression. It's also freed me from my father forever. I will never, ever speak to that man again. That's actually a side note. I got the most abusive letter any son would ever receive from their father. But in a way, it was necessary. At my age, I'm 58. To finally realize the man that gave me life feels this way about me was very, very sobering. He basically told me that my husband and I were going to hell, we were infected by Satan, and that there was no hope for us. Well, you know what? A man who rejects you like that, you do not need in your life.
No, absolutely. Well done you for stepping past it and moving forward.
Exactly.
Exactly. On the flip side, what have you discovered that you are absolutely rubbish at?
What am I absolutely rubbish at? Well, I'm rubbish at many things. I'm so not practical. So this is nothing new. I know my limitations. I know that I would never be able to do DIY. I just can't. I don't have the patience for it. I don't have the skills for it. So I don't think I've discovered anything new about my failings. One of the things that I'm good at, though, is I'm good at acknowledging my failings and accepting them. If I can't do it, I can't do it. That's what hired help is for. Now, I'd rather pay somebody to do it. Or actually, that's what my husband's for. So I can say that because he's sitting right behind me at the moment.
Excellent. As everything has changed and everything's become a little bit more topsy-turvy, shall we say, what have you realised that you have become grateful for?
What I'm grateful for, actually, is, in a sense, everything. Because having come out of depression, which is a very bleak place to be indeed, I always think depression is akin to Groundhog Day, which each day is the same as the day before. There's no change in texture. You just do the same stuff again. You go through the same misery every day. And when you come out of depression, which is where I am now, you realize there's so much to be grateful for. I'm grateful for, first of all, my husband. Secondly, my friends, my life, my recovery. Right now, I can literally see Lake Windermere outside the window here.
Oh, wow.
I'm so grateful to be sitting here looking at Lake Windermere. That is so, so beautiful. The world is a beautiful place. And I guess that the thing I also need to be grateful for is that there's life beyond theatre. For the last 40 years, I started going to the theatre when I was 16 with vengeance. I mean, I locked into theatre when I was about 14. But basically, for the last 40 years, my life has been nothing but the theatre. And I guess that what has happened in the last 9 months is that I've realized, and I guess I've always known this instinctively, that there's probably more to life than theatre. I've long thought that when I get to my deathbed, do I really want to test my life in terms of the number of shows I've seen? No, I don't. I'd rather have my life assessed in something else. Actually, yes, it's great that I've seen the original production of A Chorus Line, let's say, or great that I love the recent production of Pippin, which is just opened in Sydney. I adored that production. I saw it on Broadway when it opened. But my life is more than Pippin and A Chorus Line.
Yes.
And I guess that's what I'm grateful for.
Wow, that's actually a really, really lovely answer. And me personally, I've also come to the very same conclusion. So cheers to that.
Indeed.
The next question could be highly embarrassing for you, which means it could be very entertaining for us. So are you ready for this question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. What is something that you don't want the rest of the world to know that you have geeked out at during lockdown? And examples might be binge watched a series or played a game on an iPhone or ate a packet of chocolate biscuits in under 2.5 minutes.
Okay, well, guilty pleasure time for us, my husband and I. We adore a TV series we're now watching on Netflix called Selling Sunset. Selling Sunset is a real estate program set in LA in which a bunch of dolly birds, estate agents, I'm not being sexist here, that's basically what they are. They're heavily Botoxed women on very high heels, impossibly high heels, in fact, I would say, to the point that they're basically drag queens. They totter around LA selling these ludicrous properties which start at $5 million and they go up to, there's one property that they've been trying to sell which is selling for $75 million, and that's an extraordinary program. Of course, a lot of it's staged, but they're constantly bitching with each other. They're constantly falling out of each other and having rows. It's a fascinating slice of human life. And, they have children, they have dogs, they have inappropriate relationships with much younger men. The whole gamut happens on this program. What's so interesting is that the way it's styled is that there are men in the office, apart from the two men who run it, but we never see them. We only see these women. There isn't a mirror that they don't see that they don't like. They're constantly checking themselves out. And It's kind of glorious. It's a beautiful, guilty pleasure.
Wow. I think because of the soap opera-ness of what you've just explained, that's going to be a beautiful segue to the next question. You've taken your seat for press night at a new West End show. You discover that you are sitting next to a soap opera producer. By the end of interval, they are clearly impressed. They've offered you a leading role. What type of character are you hoping that they're going to write for you, considering, as we've just discovered, soaps are just a little bit more dramatic than real life?
A theatre critic as a character in a soap opera could be interesting. Obviously, I don't want to play him myself. I think I may have to get James Corden in as the substitute for me. That would be quite good casting. I mean, apart from else, James and I know each other very well. I was watching The Prom the other day. I don't know if you've received it in Australia yet, but The Prom was a Broadway musical. They just filmed with Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, James Corden, and an all-star cast. And they did a world premiere of the film ahead of its release on Netflix. So you had to be sent a password to watch it.
Okay.
And I was invited to the world premiere. An hour and a half into watching it, my phone buzzes and it's a text from James Corden saying, James Corden here, I see you're watching The Prom. What do you think? And we proceeded to have a long exchange about the film, in which I said to him, he plays a very flamboyantly gay character, and I wrote to him, I said, are you sure you're not gay? Best of all, you'll love this. I said to him at one point, I said, the only trouble was they recreated Broadway's Times Square on film, on a studio lot in LA.
Right.
But the only thing that annoyed me was the Music Box Theatre was next to Sardines, which, as you know, is not true. In fact, the Music Box Theatre is where James Corden appeared in One Man, Two Governors on Broadway, and Sardines is on 44th Street, and the Music Box is on 45th Street. Anyway, so that annoyed me. And so he said, yeah, it's true, but it is amazing what they achieved on the soundstage. Yes, it was so realistic. I was looking for Junior's Cheesecake. and he said, we're always looking for Junior's. To which I replied, well, when this is all over, you and I will meet at Junior's for a cheesecake. He said, you're wrong. So James and I are going to meet at Junior's for cheesecake, and Danielle, you have to join us.
Well, yes, I'm going to interrupt here and say the last time that I saw you was actually in New York with Mark, and we were having cheesecake at Junior's, and it was so good. I remember it with great affection.
Exactly.
So, yes, I'm up for meeting you and James Corden at Junior's in New York. So, James Corden can play you, but what kind of personality, like a villain or a beach bum or a tart with a heart?
But you know, the theatre critics are always cast as the villain, aren't they? We're always the bad, the spectre at the feast. We're regarded as the villain. I actually reject that entirely because I kind of think that we are here to celebrate theatre. Now, I don't think that means uncritically. I think that one of the things that theatre critics do is they sort of hold the theatre to account. But I think the first and foremost quality is loving the theatre. So I hope people don't think I'm the villain. Although, having said all of the above, when I was being very critical about theatres reopening during the COVID crisis, there was a lot of theatres rushing to open, and I went to a show at the London Palladium, which was not sufficiently socially distanced to my mind. I took a photograph, and you could see that people were too close to each other. And I got really angry about this because it did not feel safe to me. Anyway, I highlight this incongruity. And one musical director who I know sent me a very, very cross and vicious email saying, why are you trying to destroy the industry?
Yeah, right.
To which I replied, I'm not trying to destroy the industry, I'm trying to save it. Because I don't want the theatres to reopen indiscriminately and then for a theatre to become a major spreader, super spreader, and then all the theatres to be closed down indefinitely. I want the theatres to reopen, but I want them to reopen safely. And what I have been doing in the last few weeks before we have the latest lockdown is before I will go to a theatre, I will inquire, what are your COVID provisions? How are you protecting the audience? If they're not protecting the audience sufficiently, in my opinion, I will not go.
Okay, that's a fair call. And that's a really sensible and smart thing to do. I wish everyone would do that.
Indeed.
Well, Mark, sadly, that is the end of the questions. But just before we conclude the interview, as you've just told us, there is very limited live theatre in the UK at present. Being a well-known theatre reviewer, I want to make sure that you're keeping up with your skills. So I have a little bit of a challenge for you.
Go ahead.
Could you briefly review any item right in front of you in a theatrical context?
An item right in front of me.
Any item that you just see, pick it up, 4 or 5 lines, and review it like you were reviewing a theatre show.
Oh, that's hard. Right in front of me, I've got a Tropicana pressed apple juice carton, which is, I guess, functional. It serves its purpose. It contains apple juice, which is delicious. But I have to say that the design is not especially inspiring. It's very square and very bulky, but it's serving its purpose, and you can't ask for more. And the most important thing, the juice is delicious. So it's like putting a great show into a smelly old theatre. So you obviously you're reviewing the show, you're not reviewing the theatre. But actually, the theatre is part of the experience. And that's one of the joys of the West End and Broadway, is that these theatres are old-established, beautiful theatres quite often. On the other hand, you go to a soulless, awful, like the Sydney Lyric Theatre, which is in this horrible casino complex.
Yes.
And it's horrible.
Yeah.
The show itself is, can be really great. So the container is not very nice in the case of Sydney Lyric, but the show itself is lovely. So the same thing about this juice. The juice is lovely, the container isn't.
Bravo, bravo. I just like to throw in a random question, personalised question for everyone at the end to make them think and go,
yes.
I wasn't expecting that. I don't know where to go, but that was actually quite brilliant.
Yes.
Yes, the Lyric Theatre in Sydney is not my favourite theatre in the world. I think it is very, very soulless, but that's just my personal opinion.
Whereas on the other hand, I do love the home to the theatre company on the wharf. I mean, those wharf theatres are so beautiful. There's nothing more beautiful than the location of those theatres.
Yes, I've worked for the Sydney Theatre Company, and also a lot of other arts companies are down on those finger wharves as well. But yes, it's a beautiful part of the world because if you're not from Sydney, they basically sit right on the harbour, underneath the harbour bridge.
Exactly.
Well, if you'd like to follow Mark on social media, he is on Twitter and Instagram at Shenton Stage. Mark also has his own website, www.shentonstage.com, and the links will be listed in the show's description. Mark Shenton, I love reading your reviews and commentaries on the latest theatre productions. It helps me keep in the loop on what's going on in the UK and New York from Sydney. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Lockdown Hotline Sessions.
Thank you, Danielle. It's beautiful stuff.
Well, as we come to the end of another episode of the Lockdown Hotline Sessions, my name is Danielle Lonnon, and you can find me on all the socials at DameDivaDan. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe and be kind. Ciao. This episode of the Lockdown Hotline Sessions was recorded and produced in Sydney in December of 2020.